Brian and David Susi right now. David, Richard referenced this. If there was, in fact, a landing gear malfunction, is there anything that could have made this a slower, safer landing?
So the couple of things on the landing gear, I think the first thing is it may have been that they anticipated a lack of power due to the fact that one of the engines was out. In that case, they would leave the landing gear up and plan to land without it so that it gets a little bit more range, assure they get back to the airport. So that's one option. The other option is, of course, a mechanical failure of some kind. But then that third option is that they just were so overwhelmed with trying to get turned around that they didn't have time to lower the landing gear. So I think those are the three things that they were facing at that time.
Yeah, we got to find out exactly what happened to make sure, as I said, doesn't happen again. Miles, the control tower, we're told, actually warned about birds in the area before the crash. Are birds really capable of causing one of the world's most devastating aviation disasters like this one?
Well, Wolf, I mean, we saw one that nearly happened about, 14 years ago in the Hudson River when an Airbus A320 leaving LaGuardia lost both engines, and Captain Sully Sullenberger put it in the Hudson. That could have very easily been the scenario we just saw. I would suggest to you, Wolf, that was a very purposeful decision on the part of the crew to keep the aircraft clean, as we call it in aviation, meaning no flaps and no gear, in order to extend the glide range. And didn't have any power at all. They might have lost one engine, and then either progressively a second engine failed or something else happened that made them essentially a glider. And so the decision to fly around to the opposite direction of the runway and keep the aircraft from having flaps and landing gear was a sound one. What perhaps they did not account for is that when you land that way, there's something we call ground effect. It's kind of the tantamount to a hovercraft effect. As it gets closer to the surface, it becomes harder and harder for the aircraft to get down on the ground. It gets more lift. And so they floated down that runway with a lot of speed, which was intended, I think, and ended up hitting the pavement much later than they anticipated. And of course, then there was that barrier, which is not a safe thing and would not be recommended at any airport. So I think that's my current theory. There's a lot to unfold. The cockpit voice recorder will tell a lot.
Yeah, it certainly will. Was this crash, Miles, you think survivable?
Yes, I do. And that's the saddest part of this. The antenna that they ran into are supposed to be what we call frangible antenna. In other words, they break away when the aircraft hits them. Most airports are designed this way. This one, they propped them up on a reinforced concrete berm covered with turf, and they did not have the engineered materials arrestor system, which is kind of like concrete that is kind of like a creme brulee surface. And when the airplane hits it, it kind of sinks in and it arrests its forward motion. 112 runways in the U.S. have this stuff, including LaGuardia Airport, incidentally. It would have been a good thing to have that there as well. So it's a couple of fronts, as Richard pointed out, that need to be addressed here. You know, what happened on the airplane, we figured that out. But as far as designing airports with overruns in mind, that's really important too.
Yeah, that's a good point. David, you agree that this potentially was survivable? And I keep pointing out, this was a Boeing 737. All of us fly on Boeing 737s all the time, a very popular plane in the U.S. and indeed around the world. What do you say to that?
Well, I think actually that this airport is the backbone, not just the U.S. aircraft, but also around the world. This aircraft has the highest reliability rating of any, and they're used more than any. They're designed to fly at least 4 or 5 flights every day, and they do. And so to have this happen to this particular aircraft, there's something else that happened here that is not related to the aircraft, in my opinion, at this point.
We'll see what that is. All right, David Susi and Miles O'Brien, thank you guys very, very much. Just ahead,